All right, everyone, interview time. We are here with repeat guests. We have Alicia and Erwan Davon here, and we are here to talk about how to be a great lover in and out of relationships, sexual mastery in and out of relationships. So this applies to couples, to single folks. There's something for you. This is our number one downloaded topic for the most part is everyone wants to learn about sexual mastery. How am I a better lover, a better partner? How do I have great sex? How do I communicate better? So we're going to talk about all of these things with these two wonderful experts. I don't have the number of the podcast you were on. Do you know the number of it or what our talk and the name was? It was
Jamie.
expanded orgasm or extended?
Yeah, extended orgasm. It was
Okay.
how to have extended orgasm.
Okay, that's easy to look up. Everyone's go on our website, look up extended orgasm. They're the only people that talked about that wonderful podcast. I'm sure some of that will overlap here. And I know you already did this on a previous episode, but we're going to ask you the same question. It's not a question, it is a command. Can you tell us, I guess that's a question, tell us about how you got to where you are today in the field of sexuality?
Well, I'll share something with you, and then Erwan, you can share a little bit about our background and our training and stuff like that, because people always want to know that, right? But I was thinking about this morning as I was thinking about coming on with you ladies, and was remembering the very beginning of my relationship with Erwan, and it was full of like turn on and so much sex. I remember this one day I had spent the night and we were in bed in the morning and had sex like 3 different times and fell asleep and woke up again. And then at 1 p.m., his roommate Adam knocked on the door and was like, "Hey, lovebirds, it's time to wake up." And we were like, that typical beginning sex, right? And then fast forward a few months and Erwan and I had our first fight. I don't even remember what this fight was about, but I do remember sitting on my couch. I had been like crying for hours. Like, I can't believe we had a fight. And Erwan called and we worked it out. And he said, "All right, we made it through. Come on over. Let's celebrate," ready to get back into it. And I remember thinking, this is the first time I've actually had a fight in a relationship and then made up and the relationship went on, right? And I remember thinking, God, how do people have sex again after getting into these normal relationship things? And our work is all about that, how to have a sex life that gets better and better over time through all that stuff we go through in relationship. And I had studied psychology. I have a master's degree training as a therapist. And when I met Erwan, I got particularly interested in the sexuality aspect of it because that's what I like, I like that.
So it really has to do with sex as a practice. Relationship sex is sex as a practice. It's funny, I was watching Netflix last night. They do those shows on heists. This one is called Heist. And it's the title of this episode is like sex, magic, murder, something. And this couple has this sex magic practice. And it's really interesting. Now, it's not our practice, but it's interesting. It's sex as a practice, right? So that's how I got started a long time ago. Is I was really interested in sex. I was meditating. I was doing all kinds of psychological stuff, all these other things as a practice. But sex was more like kind of, a random thing. I'd have it or I wouldn't. And I was kind of winging it. And sometimes it goes really well. And sometimes it didn't go really well. And then one day a light bulb went off in my head like, oh, I could have this be something I was studying and be a practice. And when I started doing that, I took every possible course and workshop I could. And one of the great things about that was I ended up having sensual contact, usually not explicit intercourse or something in a course, right? But sensual contact of touching or stroking or this or that with all kinds of people that I normally would not have. And it really expanded my horizons a lot so that I wasn't, most people are often kind of aiming for a very small percentage of the populace out there, right? And it just, there's a lot more people we could have fun with. And so it expanded my horizons, and that allowed me, because I was single, and it allowed me to have sex be a practice. And, and then women were really interested in that, like, oh, this guy's studying that and I could talk about it and this and that. Now, I didn't know. Can I curse on your podcast?
Hell, fuck
Okay,
yeah.
so I didn't
Yes,
know my
please
ass
do.
from a hole. Good. It's a good. I didn't know my ass from a hole in the ground, but I was practicing. And women really liked that, and then through really, honestly, every possible mistake I could make, eventually I got better at it. In the beginning, it was like, oh, that's the belly button, not the clitoris. Oh, okay. Whoa. But learning happened. My who I would approve of and be sexual with really expanded. And then eventually that turned into a set of touching practices and an extended orgasm practice. So if people are in a relationship, we would encourage them to have it be a practice. And it doesn't need to be explicitly sexual, right? Like our practice is a touching practice that for us usually leads to some sexual activity and extended orgasm, but it doesn't have to, and some days it doesn't. And that takes the pressure off of it, because often people don't want to have like, oh, now's the time we have to have sex, so, kind of alleviates the pressure. And it can be stroking, it could just be touching, it could be oral sex, it could be full-on intercourse, it could really be anything.
Yeah, I watched that extended orgasm video a couple of times, even after you shared. It's pretty fantastic if y'all want to check that out. I think you go back to the episode, the extended orgasm episode, and Alicia does the magic with Erwan giving her extended orgasm. It was very nice. Anyway, that's all I could think about as you were talking. I'm sorry, Erwan. What can you repeat everything? I'm just kidding.
Alicia's vulva. Yeah.
I was just thinking about Alicia's vulva.
Where it's at.
That's what we're actually thinking about.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's talk a little bit. This episode is about relationship sex as well as like sex outside of relationships. And talking about relationship sex, I know from a personal perspective, sometimes relationship sex can be difficult if you are in a long-term partnership. You eat too much food after you go out to dinner, you're on the couch, you're like, I don't feel sexy right now. Or this is me, I'm speaking for myself. Or I just want to Netflix and chill, I'm so tired. So but then sometimes it becomes a pattern, and I always go back to my I think about the 40-year-old version when he's like, is it true if you don't use it, you lose it? And I'm like, if I don't use it, I'm going to lose it. So I say that whenever. So,
but you can get it back, right?
Yeah. So I'm like, okay.
That's also true.
So when you talk about relationship sex, let's because you two, I feel like, do have it dialed, and I would love to tap into that. What is it, and how can it lead to a sex life that gets better and better while you're in a relationship?
Well, those things that you mentioned are basically a reality for most couples. And there's this kind of new normal thing that happens with couples as you get into a relationship. Either you've been together for a while and you get into the habit of Netflix and chill without any sex, or you have a kid, or you get married, or whatever. Time goes by. Relationship sex is deliberate sex, as Erwan was talking about, sex as a practice. Just this morning, I woke up. So I've been up since like 6:15, you guys, because we have a 5-year-old. He gets up whenever he wants to get up and yells for me. And then I make him a snack and this and that. My morning started a long time ago. And by the time I did all the stuff and I made his lunch and I walked him over to the park for camp and I got back, usually you're kind of like, all right, well, I guess I'll go to work or get on my computer or something. And it was great because my friend drove me home from dropping off my son, and she's like, all right, like, what are you up to today? And I'm like, well, I'm going to go in and have some QT with Erwan. And I looked at her and she's like, oh, we so need that. It has been so long. And in our calendars, every morning, 9:15 is pleasure time. It's deliberate, and yes, it's scheduled. And I walk in the house and walk down the stairs to our bedroom, and there's like this spa radio playing. And I'm like, oh yeah, logistics melt away. And I crawl in bed with Erwan. And then I start with the deep touch. I put one hand on his heart and one on his abdomen, and we're breathing. And then it progresses, and we have an extended orgasm date. He's stroking my clitoris. It was amazing. And afterwards, we're lying there together and I feel so high, like expansive, like that post-sex feeling. And then we go into our days. So being deliberate about it is the key.
I love Alicia's description, and I love that that was our morning.
That was our morning.
And the secret, just to really cut to the chase of it, is, what she just described, that's great. And that's more important to us and maybe to your listeners than the logistics of life or our egos and our psychology. So, we both have psychology degrees and we work with people in that respect, but largely to get that stuff out of the way and put the fun first. And then, as Alicia said, have the fun be a practice, have it be deliberate, have that be the priority, submit our lives to that. I think in a lot of ways, the way you two are doing, you're doing this podcast, you're putting something really juicy, fun first for yourselves and for other people. And that's what people really want.
So you're making a priority, you're scheduling deliberate, intimate time, or the word that you used was pleasure time. It doesn't necessarily mean penis and vagina, it's always going to go this one way. We're making this plan to make this a priority, and for you all, it's scheduling 9:15 in the morning. Then you have a fabulous day. Everyone, go to our YouTube channel. They're glowing. We have this is on video, so you can see it works. And I really like that, because I think that a lot of people think, well, scheduling sex isn't sexy, but we're not having that time. We're not making that time. We have children. We're really busy. And I think what people get stuck on is that they're scheduling a type of sex. I rub your nipples, we kiss, but penis goes in vagina, or whatever. We rub our vaginas in each other. Depends on what kind of sex you're having. And that is too much pressure. It's not sexy. And I like that what you're saying. You're making a priority and you're scheduling pleasure time, but it doesn't have to go one way. And we've talked about this a lot on the podcast. I personally think that's what makes great lovers, great sex, great connections, great partnerships. And I'm constantly talking about that with people that I work with too. It's like, well, when you're having sex, does it have to go a certain way? What does sex mean to you? And, if you're not finding time for it, how are you making time? So my next question for you about that, maybe more to say about what I said, but also, what in your opinion makes a great lover? I'm sure there's a lot to it, but what do you two think in your expert skills?
Mm-hmm.
One thing I think is whoever the feminine person is in the relationship, whether it's a man and a woman or two men or two women, there's usually somebody in the relationship. For example, I grew up in Greenwich Village in Manhattan, and our neighbors across the hall were gay. God, this was long ago. So it was 30 years ago. And one of them was clearly more feminine. And it was really interesting because they had a really turned on, polarized relationship, because the energy really moved in a romantic way between them. So one of the secrets is the more masculine person, male, female, whatever, really putting attention on the more feminine person, and the feminine person really, being willing to acknowledge her appetite and absorb that attention. And it's like a battery that gets the energy really moving. It's one of the things I love about Alicia. She is not shy about her appetite.
Yes. And Erwan is totally willing to pay attention and bring presence into our relationship. We were just, speaking of Greenwich Village, we were just traveling. We were in New York visiting Erwan's dad. And and we brought Aiden, our son. And it was so hot, right? We'd go out for a few hours, and then we came back into our apartment one afternoon, and we were hot. And we had this little ritual of filling up the bathtub for our feet with cold water and cooled off. And then Aiden got absorbed in some dinosaur video, and he was over there in the living room, right? And I was not present to anything except organizing, right? So I'm organizing, and I got Aiden handled, and I'm cleaning up and this and that. And Erwan lies down on the bed, and he was like, hey, well, Aiden seems pretty absorbed. We could have some private time. And I'm oh, I don't need private time. I already finished cleaning up. I think probably let's go out for ice cream. Let's go. And I was just on a million miles an hour. And he just looked at me. He's like, no, private time. Clicked in, and I'm oh, I forgot for a second. I'm sounds good, baby. And then I just went, made sure Aiden was fine, closed the door, locked the door, and we had a really fun time. And it was his presence and attention. And then I was willing to just drop everything and turn on. And that's what is good in a relationship, when you're willing to do that.
And one thing that came to mind for me is because I know this is really common for folks. Like, okay, so let's use that dynamic. So, like, and we're talking about heterosexual relationship here. The woman is in mom mode. She's like, I got all logistics, mom, and mom, sex is not on my mind. And her partner is like, hey, how about some sexy time? And she's like, I'm so not there. You know, she's wearing the mom jacket or the mom hat, and she's stuck in that role. And I think for a lot of people, what has happened is now the partner's like, hey, how about some sexy time? This I think is a really huge thing. Maybe I will see what you guys think about this. When the pressure is, what that means is it has to go a certain way, it has to go to orgasm, penetrative sex. They're often like, no, you know, there's a big no to it. But when instead it was, hey, how about some us time? Could just be, I'm just going to massage your body for 30 minutes and it doesn't even have to go anywhere. I think that a lot more of those people, whether it's the woman wearing the mom hat, the dad wearing the dad hat, or the I just went to work hat, that they would be more likely to potentially take it off knowing that that pressure isn't there and that it's just about intimate connection. And it could just be all about them, and that could be nice.
You know, that's really exactly right. Let's say penetrative sex is Z on a scale of A to Z. You know, people usually don't want to jump right to Z, you know, men or women. And, you know, but people are often really excited about B or C, and B or C is 26 letters earlier. So B or C might be, you know, a hand on her back or a hand on his thigh, you know, or, you know, let's have some private time, or we say, or do our practices, right? It's just very open. Most people are willing to lay down and have a hand on their abdomen and a hand on their heart with some nice music. Then from there to a little touching, okay, you know, maybe they're open to that. Maybe they're not, but maybe they are. So it's much easier to go from A to B to C to D. And you don't have to get to Z because you're gratified all along. You know, most days we don't have intercourse. We have extended orgasm most days, but we don't have intercourse most days. And some days we don't have extended orgasm, but it's always gratifying. It's a sensual practice.
Mm-hmm. Love that.
I think that what came up for me when you were talking about tending to your child and then forgetting about sex, for me, I don't have a child to tend to, but I have a work that's stressful. And so if my partner or ex-partner, whoever out there that this has happened with, when that happens, when they're like, hey, like trying to get, I call it like getting fresh with me. I'm like, no, like I am not wanting to get fresh right now. Like I am like stressed out. I just want to kind of mind numb, right? Which I know that I have friends out there that may or may not be listening, that they've told me that, like, April, sometimes I just don't want to fuck my husband. Like, how can I do that? And I'm like, look, it is about kind of setting some of the standards of what you want, the scheduling. And also sometimes when you drop in, and I know for me, after I really drop in and start to feel the touch, instead of thinking about it and almost getting in my brain in a way where I'm like, it sounds like work to me right now to be sexual with you. When I start to like drop in to the moment, focus on the breath, focus on the touch, then I can get out of my head instead of feeling like it's a chore or a job, which every time I've ever been in that state and then actually had some kind of experience with a partner, it's always been amazing afterward. It's about just dropping in. So I just wanted to share that because I thought about having to tend to something or having to work and then you're not on the same page as your partner. And this is the piece where communication, everybody talks about communication, right? Everybody, and you say communication to people and they're like, okay, that's what everybody says. So, and Emily Morse, who we adore and love, we call her our matriarch of shameless sex because she is the reason we are where we are today. And on her show, she uses this communication is lubrication, and she talks about it a lot, and it's so catchy and wonderful, and that's why we love her. But let's talk about how communication is lubrication, and especially in terms of showing up and being a sexual master and obtaining the sexual mastery that we're all about.
It's true. Communication is everything. We say in the pleasure course that sex is a subset of communication. You have to have communication, right? I mean, over the weekend, we were teaching a pleasure course. It's one of our courses. And we had a special one for people 60 and over. Okay. So everybody in this course, they were between 60 and 80. And there was a point in the course where everybody did these clothed non-sexual touching practices. And, the people whose turn it was to lay down, they laid down, and then their partners were sitting and putting one hand on their heart, one hand on their abdomen. And there was like silence in the room, and it was kind of like low energy. And then we said, oh, everybody say something that you like about what the person's doing. And then you hear this like, that feels really good. Oh, yes. I like your hand there. Oh, good. And then we said, okay, ask for something you want. And I said, would you use firmer pressure? And then as the chatter started, the turn on increased so much in the room, asking for what they wanted. It was everything. And that's how it can be in a relationship. It's basically a cycle of appreciation, making requests, appreciation, making requests. If you have that habit, you have a much better sex life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that leads to our next question. What if it's hard asking for what you want? A lot of folks really struggle with that of all genders. A lot of it has to do with conditioning or past shame and trauma or just a lack of experience. But what about people who are like, it's really hard for me to ask for what I want? What do you have to say to them?
Well, the first thing is give an approval first, as Alicia said, because it is hard to ask for what we want because, it comes right up against any self-esteem issues. But if we're generous with the other person, it's almost very Buddhist, like right speech. If we're generous with the other person and loving and wow, your hand feels really good on my abdomen. Would you move it up to my solar plexus? It's much easier to state the request after having given something to the other person. It's just easier. It feels better. We're in a field of relationship with them. It's a palpable field. We're not in our heads, in our self-esteem issues. We're in a loving, energetic, palpable field of presence, and we're being responsible for that and generating that. And then from there, a request is much easier. And then a tip with the requests, precede them with approvals, but also have the requests be something that the other person can do. Sometimes people are like, would you do it better and make me feel this way? And would you
do it better?
It's like, and
you're doing it wrong.
Right. So instead, it's like, would you move your hand from my abdomen to my solar plexus? Would you use a little bit more pressure? Oh, I love that your hand is there. That pressure is perfect, and that's my belly button. Would you go 6 inches down? Just real clear and simple.
That is way better than my shit sandwich version.
Yeah, no, asking for what you want. That's something that does help. And even if you're feeling in that eggy kind of intense mood where you're not dropping into your experience with your partner, that's a really good way to tie in for those folks out there that may have trouble communicating what you want. Just talking about the experience that you're having, like, will you give me a vulva hug? Will you stroke my hair? Will you rub my gluteus maximus because there's a lot of tension back there.
My ace.
No, but no anal, no anal yet.
Yeah.
So that just really does tie into what the experiential part of what you're having with the partner instead of getting in your head about it or the pushback, because it's not easy. It is a practice, as you said in the beginning, Erwan. It's a practice, and it's not a job, though, right? It's a practice.
Right.
So,
That's right. That's a good point.
Yes. Yeah. And
So-
it gives you something to do. We all have psychological stuff that comes up during sex and in relationships. So if you have like, okay, say something that I'm enjoying and then say something very simple, that's a to-do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's simple. That's a simple map
I
or
like chocolate
guide.
chip cookies.
And do you want me to make them for you? Or?
Yeah. So,
Cool. Okay, I
Oh,
gotta
you-
go. I'm making her cookies
it's
now.
'cause you're a champ. So, okay, so
Aw.
let's say that you are, I'm going to set the scene. You're in a relationship, and it could be, I am married to my husband, and I have a vulva, he has a penis, and that doesn't really matter in the story. However, this part, my husband is making some requests that I'm uncomfortable with. He's saying, I want you to be more dominant in the bedroom. I want you to chain me up and whip me up. No, he doesn't. Maybe he's not even that dark. He's like, I just want you to dominate
Or maybe
me.
he's awesomely that dark.
Maybe he is, yes. And I feel uncomfortable. So, what are the tips for folks out there that they are experiencing this? They don't know how to address it with their partners. They're uncomfortable. They feel challenged by their requests.
Well, the first thing is to take it all in as information. The fact, like, that people are communicating about that topic. Let's say it's an uncomfortable request. That is so much better than no request. Uncomfortable communication, difficult communication, communication where you're not on the same page, even bad communication is way better than no communication. So, and that kind of starts you from good. And you can kind of look at that like, oh, okay, wow, that's interesting that you want that and I want this. And that starts to put people into that field of commonality, that field of communication, that field of relationship. When two people are in a field of relationship, I like that word because it's very visual and palpable. It's not conceptual. It's like we can feel it. Something very interesting happens, which is people come together and they start to want the same things, which is really, really interesting. When we're in a field of consciousness together, it's like a touch that feels good to one person, usually feels good to the other person. So there's a kind of magic that happens there, and one person may find like, oh, okay, wow, I kind of do like that, or oh, okay, I thought I wanted this, but like, as we're really together, I'm finding I want something else. So things start to have the relationship almost as an entity has like its own desire. Now, to say one added part to that, which is the feminine person in the description you described, you or the woman, or if it's a gay relationship, the feminine person, in our opinion, they have an ace up their sleeve. They have a feminine power, a magic that can I used to use the name of the last president for this, but I don't like to use it anymore. Yeah, they have a magical power. It's like that special card in the deck that she can play that card. Oh wow, you really want me to dominate you? Oh, okay, wow. And she, it's like that, and then it's like, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. Boy, I'm really turned on by this, and like go really into that, and like that. I'm not saying always, but that will often just, okay, whoever the more masculine person is will often just be like, wow, I don't know, that sounds really interesting. I'm dominating you. You want me to dominate you? Okay. All right. If she's really feeling, if it's a woman, her pussy, if it's a guy, his feminine part, whatever it is, if she's really feeling that part, that tends to, romance in a certain sense, maybe not a politically correct thing to say, but romance in a certain sense is kind of a feminine territory. Mm-hmm. And the guy doesn't have to be, or the masculine person doesn't have to be belittled by that. He can really be a knight in shining armor, and then, I'll speak graphically since this is a shameless sex podcast,
Yes,
it's almost selfish because my cock gets handled really, really well. I'm in agreement with reality.
Totally.
That's a hell yeah. Can
your
I get
cock
a hell
wins.
yeah to
hell yeah
that
to
one?
your cock winning. Well, and I think the other thing for people too is there's a request is a request, right? I'd really love for you to dominate me. It doesn't mean you have to, and we're breaking up if you don't. But there are some things that are really important to people. Hey, this is a really important thing to me. There's something about me that really craves to feel dominated, for me to feel a little less in control or submissive. Are you willing to work with me? And it doesn't mean that the other person's like, oh yeah, here, I got it right now, let me do it. It's still a negotiation of how far can they lean into the other person. Maybe they need to learn some skills. There's people that they can work with, such as yourselves or other folks, to learn how to step into this role. And there is a way that might be more authentic to that person and what dominance is versus, this is just the example I'm using, is dominance, but then what we see in porn or in the kink world or something. And so it's still figuring out your unique expression while kind of learning how far you can lean in to your capacity. But I think there still is a skill piece to it. I know for myself, I remember having partners where there was requests like, I want you to do more role play, dress kind of sexy, like sexy squirrel girl and stuff. And it would bring up this spotlight thing for me that I was like, oh God, this is really scary now. And it was really hard for me to overcome in that. But I also feel like there's something there in the way that they were making a request from me, but they weren't also reciprocating how they would show up too, or like how can they support me in moving into this role that's new and different for me. So I guess my long-winded way of saying is there's not one perfect way to do it. It's a constant negotiation. We have to kind of check in with what's authentic to ourselves and how we can lean in, but also as a supporting partner who's making the request, how are you going to support this other person potentially learning something new too? I don't know, what do you guys think about all that? I've said a lot, but
Yeah, well, it comes back to communication, and also being approving. I mean, sex is such a tender, sensitive area. So like if your partner makes a request and they say, I want this, I want that, and at first it scares you, and you might have the tendency to like criticize it, out of fear or something. You might want to say, oh, interesting. Wow, thank you for telling me about that. Let's talk about that. So that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, more conversations that are like, all right, let's just do it.
Well,
more
if
like,
you're a hard no on something,
Yeah.
I think you can express that, say that's just out of my comfort zone right now. Maybe I'll learn more about it, because we do get questions from listeners and their partners are making some sort of they're honoring their fantasy or their desires, and the either the questionee or the questioner will say, I'm not comfortable with that and I don't know how to address that. So if you are a hard no to things, I think honor that and also do learn more about the ask.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I like that you said learn more, April, because there's psychological issues that play out for people sexually, especially when we start to talk about dominance and submission and this kind of stuff. Like, a lot of that doesn't really have much to do with sex. It has a lot to do with psychology, and it kind of spills over to sex. And that territory really needs to be dealt with. Now, for us, in the morning, Alicia comes back, she comes into bed, we're laying there, I had a very rough past. I'll spare you the whole story. I probably talked about it in the last podcast. But every morning when we start our practices, I have to feel through a whole bunch of different things. Now, through all the meditation and the psychological inquiry and all the rest of that stuff that we do, I can generally feel through it pretty readily. But I do have to feel through that stuff so that it doesn't just spill out unconsciously. Mm-hmm. So I love that you said, I forget exactly how you said it, but you do have to address that part. And it's good to talk about that part and deal with that part. Because every morning I'm laying there feeling through some things, and some of it is really intense. Mm-hmm. But just feeling through it, it really evaporates. And in reality, this sexy woman and her clitoris and all that, it just comes to the fore, and it's like, yeah, let's have
that clitoris, Alicia. Damn.
I've seen it. I saw it too.
Oh, again, go check out the video. Go look at the extended orgasm one.
Very nice.
So what about for single people who are listening or maybe are about to become single at some point? And actually the episode before this was about breakups and hot girl, hot boy summers and singledom. So go check it out if you haven't listened to that one. But okay, so say someone's single and they're like, well, I'm not in a relationship. How do I work on this sexual mastery stuff? What can single folks do right now to become more badass lovers?
So I'll name some things, and what you just said is so great, because the other day I was at the park with Aiden and his little friend, and his mom and I were sitting on the bench chatting, and she just got divorced. And so she said to me, I mean, we'd never talked about our work or anything. I usually sort of let people bring that up if they're in the parenting community. And she's like, I want to know more about your work because I'm in the slut phase. I'm in the slut phase. It's so good. And I met this guy and he's into Tantra. And it was the most fun conversation. So yes, there is that hot boy, hot girl summer phenomenon you're talking about. So for those of you that are single, you can begin to gain skills that'll help you get into a relationship and help the relationship be fun and hot and sexy. So we have 4 practices that we train all of our students in. We recommend practicing them all. Meditation, psychological inquiry, which means learning about yourself and your psychological patterns, body practice, and sensual practice. So I'll cut to sensual practice, right? There's a set of sensuality exercises that help you explore and learn about your body. And they really can create turn on in your body. Like the other night we have an online class, Mastery of Relationship, and there's a woman in it and she's like newly single. I was like, what am I going to do? No sex until I get back into a relationship. And she starts doing these sensual practices, and she's like, okay, to this like 40-person class. She's like, I was in front of the mirror and then I looked and saw this like shimmery peach color of my cheek I'd never seen before. And I felt so in love with myself. And you could see her face getting more and more glowy and her attractiveness increasing just by doing these exercises and sharing about them. So we recommend actually being in action around this stuff when you're single.
Sensuality, I love what Alicia said, because it's not necessarily sexuality. The first time I did the sensual practices, I was staying in somebody's room. They were out of town and the room was a mess. It was a complete mess, and I'm supposed to do sensual practices in this room. But I found that if I turned on a colored light, I put a red light, kind of like the red light district. I put on a red light in the room and then threw a big sheet over all of this person's stuff. And it just looked like some kind of magical heaven realm. And in my senses, I was, like color, and I had a little chocolate with some piece of fruit on it. I don't know, a fig or a raspberry or something like that. So the color and the taste of that, and I had some Sade playing. It's very sensual, and sensuality is rewarding in itself and a great step to sexuality. And it's something that singles can do on their own. And of course, they can do sex on their own also, which will kind of get your energy moving, really including your sexual center and your vital center, even if it's just maybe you're masturbating, or maybe you're just feeling that part of yourself as you walk around the world. And, you find, every time I pass somebody who's the gender that I'm attracted to, it's actually a sexual encounter. There's energy exchanged. Most people have had that experience of somebody's getting on the bus or I grew up in Manhattan, so it'd be on the subway, and the doors are closing and you catch eyes and you're just in love with, it's almost easier to be in love with them because it's so, there's no commitment, it's just like, that's happening all the time. And when we acknowledge that and celebrate that, it just starts to expand. And before you know it, you're like a magnet, a gravitational center for sex and relationship and fun.
It's so true. It's almost schooling yourself about yourself, getting a PhD in you in a way, because each of those tips really centered around the brain. It was about learning about yourself, the touch, and
meditation,
which is
it makes great lovers. I'll tell you.
Embodied. So it is. It's sort of getting to know yourself, and that brought up something that I think about when people really know what they want, especially in the dating world. It is so fucking hot. And it doesn't even have to be sexual. But when they're like, I like the Italian restaurant down on 30th and Broadway, you're like, that's why I fell in love with you when that subway door closed. Right? I don't even know if 30th and Broadway is a thing, but
I'm sure it is.
Just threw it out there.
Yeah.
So Yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad. So
Yes. Well, especially as women, we're sort of by the culture trained to be low maintenance, but no, high maintenance women are the most attractive.
Agreed.
oh, hell to the yeah. And you can do it in a way it's authentic and not bitchy, or you're being
Not
overly
right?
Yeah.
Just like,
Yeah.
hey, this is what I like. Take me there,
Yeah.
baby.
Yeah.
And there is something great about being flexible as well. I feel like I'm a very alpha type A human that will drop in if someone else wants to be more type A. I'm like, you go ahead.
You do you.
You
Yeah.
do you, and I'll ride the wave. So
Yeah.
that I think that's helpful information. I do think that's actually good advice. So the next question, which I'm sad, I don't want it to be the last one because I love you.
Oh,
too.
we'll have them back. Don't you
You're going
worry.
to be back. So tell us about your offerings, because obviously you spoke a little to your online workshops, and there's other free offerings as well, just to get a little taste of Alicia and Erwan's their vibe. It's very nice. So please let everyone know how to find you.
Yes. So for all of you that are listening that are interested in learning more about working with us, I'm offering a free love life consultation. So that's a conversation between me and you on Zoom, and we'll get personal. We'll dive into whatever is going on for you that's of top concern, romantically, sexually. You can ask me questions, tell me about your challenges. And if it looks like Erwan and I can support you, then I'll lay out the different ways you can work with us. Our most popular program is Mastery of Relationship. It's like an online community class. We also have a pleasure course, which is a weekend intensive that's coming up in August. And we have coaching and all sorts of fun stuff. So I'll lay out all of that for you. And the way to set up this love life consultation is to text the school. The number's 415-308-9580.
Or we'll have a link in the show notes. Yeah.
You
Oh, sorry.
got
Go
it.
ahead. Yeah.
In the show notes, 415-308-9580. You can text it. There's also going to be a link in the show notes to set up the consultation if you prefer. If you're kind of like, and I just want to try something, I don't need a big conversation, we'll also give you the link to sign up for our online pleasure course happening in August. And our website is pleasurecourse.com.
Ooh, I love a simple, to the point web address.
Yes.
Hard to find these days. Good job.
I know. And all our work is for both singles and couples. We've got a bunch of different ways you can work with us, and we love this.
Well, you forgot www.
Oh, the HTTP.
I assumed.
It's great. I hope we all get to hang out someday. You two are so
I know.
Well,
You're in the Bay Area still, right?
know.
Yeah. Well, we can
We'll
maybe
invite
meet up
you to
for
a
our next one.
Yeah, let's do it. We haven't done a face-to-face interview for a long time, and so that would be lovely. And hopefully we can still keep the backdrop that you have on, because that is fresh.
I want to meet with you right after your morning practice, though. I want that glow.
Yeah.
Maybe April and I will do a morning practice too. I'll be glowing.
Ooh.
This is getting better.
Yes. We're creating magic. And everyone's, can you film that too? Okay, maybe.
Well, so lastly, I know that Alicia didn't include www, but I'm going to include one W, which stands for wine.
Wine!
Because it's the World Wine Club right here. Worldwide Wine Club over here. It's not a thing yet, but it may be. And what are we talking about? We're talking about Margins Wine. That's right. It's not even noon, and I have a little left. So if you are looking at us on YouTube, you can see that, yes, we like to drink some wine. And go to marginswine.com, sign up for the newsletter. You can also save some cha-cha-chang-chang money, honey, if you just enter in some codes that are also in our show notes. I won't give them to you right now because I do remember them, actually, Amy, and I never usually do, but I want you to go and check out our website, www. Why not? It's not. It's shamelesssex.com. All right, y'all. That's all we have for you, Alicia and Erwan. Thank you so much. We absolutely adore you both. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We'll hopefully see you soon. Air high fives, digital, and if you're checking us out, if you're checking us out on YouTube, we're gonna have more YouTube videos now. I have to put on makeup for a video. It's not that fun, but still, we love you. All right, y'all. We'll see you next Tuesday. Ciao for now.